I'm Jamie O'Kane, CPA, Small Business Advanced Tax Planning and Compliance Extraordinaire, and this is the Abundant Beans Podcast, the podcast that takes my love for learning what makes people tick while digging into the good, bad, and ugly of small business ownership. We strive to give you the insight that only those in the trenches of being and working with entrepreneurs can provide. Today, I'd like to welcome to the podcast Casey Trudy. Casey has bought 21 failing small businesses over the past 50 years, fixed the obvious mistakes, and resold them at a profit. In the 1990s, he sold over 1 million audio cassettes on building a business. Audio cassettes.
Audio cassettes?
I do. On building a business. In 2003, he owned the world's largest QuickBooks trading company with 400 locations. That is mind-boggling to me. In 2015, he invented Autokept, the world's first voice recognition, expense tracking, and bookkeeping app, so small business can track their tax deductions by just talking to their phone. All these adventures spun out of his bookkeeping business that he started when he was 16 after getting kicked out of high school. Casey, welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jamie.
Spending time with us.
I'm excited to be here. Work on the ranch today in Arizona, and I'm actually in the house. Usually I work in the barn, but there's too much light in the barn for video cameras.
Yeah. I just work in the house.
Yeah, plus it smells better in here.
Probably smells a little better.
Well,
So
I smoke cigars, and my wife won't let me work in the house.
Oh, she's like, I don't want to smell you.
She's go out there and with the cows, they smell just like you.
I like her. We would be friends. So answer for us. What was your first job?
Being a bookkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first job I was actually as what I would call an adult. Everybody that's an entrepreneur, if you're naturally good at it, you probably started when you were 5, selling the neighbor garden seeds or making up something to sell. But at 16, I got kicked out of high school. And listen, here's why I got kicked out, because I got caught kissing a girl in the backseat of driver's ed. And and the instructor looked up in the rearview mirror and pulled the car over to the side of the street and made me walk 3 miles back to school. When I got there, all my stuff was sitting on the curb, and don't come in, a sign on the door. So I went home, and I kind of liked bookkeeping, so I started doing that for a small auto detail shop. Now, this is in Wyoming in the 1960s, and this little detail shop was the only place in the state that played Motown. It was owned by old black guys. Mm-hmm. And I used to go by there all the time, listen to music and dance, da-da-da, da-da-da. Mm-hmm. And so I went down and asked them, do you guys need a bookkeeper? And that was my first job.
So you were doing, in the 60s, you had like double ledger paper.
Well, that's all you could work on then was green ledger paper and a pencil, number 2 pencils, and you kept what was called then a 10 key. Mm-hmm. You'd punch in numbers and then pull the handle and make a big loud noise. The electric motor would turn on and crunch out the number on a piece of paper.
I have worked on green ledger paper, so I'm young, but I've worked on green ledger paper. My first accounting job, like out of college, they would hand me green ledger paper and say, write down your journal entries and we'll see if they're right. And then you can enter them.
Awesome. See, it goes, and that was just 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago, 16 years ago.
So, and actually our first phone in Wyoming, I remember talking on the phone, you actually had to climb up on a stool and crank the handle and ask the operator to connect you to the neighbor.
That's so crazy.
So the world has changed a lot in 66 years.
It really has. It's really kind of mind-boggling. We used to have one of those rotary phones when I was little, and I used to dial Japan because I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and my mom would be like, "Who's calling Japan?" And then she looked at the number. She goes, "Oh, it's Jamie. She's calling Japan."
Yeah, at $4 a minute.
Yes, she was not happy with me. So you have had many businesses and ventures. Can you give us the highlight reel?
Hey, when I was 16 and I started working for this old black man that ran the auto detail shop. It only took me a few weeks to realize he was an absolute terrible businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, why don't you sell this business? You shouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if some fool would give me $5,000 for this place, I'd sell it right now. Well, I pulled out his checkbook and wrote a $5,000 check on his checking account and post-dated it and said, would you sign this for me? And go. And I took over the business right then. And I thought that was probably the highlight of my life, because I'm 16, I can't even legally sign a lease or sign up for electric, but I now own a business. And so we started fixing the problems, and the two guys that stayed with me, they played lots of Motown. We had a great time, but we fixed the obvious problems in this business. And at that point, that guy's biggest problem was he went out and got commercial accounts for less than it was costing him to do the work. And that's why he was losing money. And he wasn't keeping track on his accounting so that he knew what jobs were profitable and not. So I just fixed that mistake. And 8 months later, I sold the company for enough to buy a brand new Camaro, which was a big deal for a kid that was 16. And so that was, I started out of the gate with a big highlight. And then just went from one project to another. But I'll tell you, the biggest one recently is that I got a call from another accountant and said, come to Tucson because there's a $3 million home health care company here that owes $1 million in payroll taxes. And on Friday, the Internal Revenue Service is going to close them down. So I flew.
So just for our listeners, so what happens with payroll taxes? I'm just going to explain that since you and I are both accountants, so we can explain how that happens. So what happens is an employer takes the payroll taxes out of the employee's checks and then didn't pay them in, which is a huge deal. And the IRS did not like that.
They were into the IRS for $1 million.
That's a lot of payroll.
That's a lot of payroll. As a matter of fact, sometimes that's a prison sentence.
Yes, that's a lot of payroll.
And so we entered negotiation with them on Tuesday. And this is actually kind of interesting what happened here. I looked at everything they had, all their books, their assets, yada, yada, and spent a couple of hours going over their business plan. But whenever I go in to negotiate about buying a business, I carry two envelopes with me. One has $10,000 in cash, the other one $5,000 in cash, because I'm going to steal this business cash offer. And after talking to him, I said, okay, I want three things: a copy of your operations manual, your employee list, and your customer list. And that's all I want. Put that on a CD-ROM, and here's an envelope with $10,000 in it. And you're going to go out of business Friday. So they moaned and cried about what I was stealing the company from them. And then finally they agreed that was get out of town money. Now, here's the important thing. If you buy a business in bulk, it's called a bulk transfer, and you don't get out of the tax liability. However, I knew that if you only buy 49% of the assets only, and only buy 49% or less, then the bulk transfer law doesn't apply. So the next morning I went down to the Internal Revenue Service, the collection agent. I sat down with her and I said, here's exactly what I'm going to do. I didn't buy anything but the customer list and the employee list, and I'm going to run the numbers and see which half of their customers make the most profit, and I'm going to go fire the rest of the employees and the rest of the customers over the next 2 days. And so that's what we did. We ran around the country, or ran around the Pima County in Tucson, and we only took 49% of the business. So we got a $3 million company, sliced it to $1.5 million, and by the following Tuesday, we were up and running in business with the same employees, but half the customers, and we owned it free and clear. So that was pretty clever, wasn't it?
So what happens to the $1 million in liability?
Well, it stayed with the owner of the business. And as far as I know, they gave up trying to collect. Nobody went to prison, which I've heard of on payroll taxes, that you can actually end up in jail.
Yeah, they'll shut down your business and put you in jail.
They did not go to jail. And, after 10 years, they give up. And so I think they just eventually, well, that was in 2013, so the 10 years aren't up yet. So we'll see we'll wish them good luck that they get out of it. But isn't that clever? Though it's real important to know 49% of the business, or you're going to get the debt. The bulk transfer law, even if you're buying assets only, the bulk transfer law not only applies to taxes, but a debtor can use the bulk transfer to file a solid claim in court against you.
Now, is that state by state? Or is that federal?
It's one of those codes. It's pretty much universal in all 50 states.
Man,
that number doesn't change.
That's really interesting.
So buying a business, especially distressed companies, and they have an enormous amount of debt, only buy the good assets and the good customers and let everything else go away.
That's interesting.
And then
I'm so intrigued.
And I've done this 21 times, so it's an interesting way to create wealth. Businesses, especially if they go up for sale in the $200,000 to $500,000 range, they're very easy to sell. And the reason they're easy to sell is because there are so many people that come out of corporate America and they've got $500,000 in their pension plan. But they're 57 years old.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started on people buying businesses with their retirement and not knowing how to run one. Well, no, I've just seen it go sideways too many times. I think it's a great way to buy a business, but most of these people come out of corporate America and don't know how to be business owners. Oh,
they don't. And all of that goes back to they don't pay attention to the numbers. And that, over all the years I've worked in business, going all the way back to one of my most interesting companies I bought was an auction company. And every time we went into a business to liquidate their assets, because I had a contract with the state of Wyoming to do bankruptcy clearances. Every time I went in, the books absolutely had no correlation to the business. The books were fantasy. And the business was stacked to the ceiling with inventory, accounts receivable had gone uncollected, and the business ran out of cash, and they couldn't understand why, because according to them, they were profitable without realizing accounts receivable and inventory is not cash flow. So we would end up auctioning them. And I got into that business. I'll tell you a real quick story. I got into that business by accident. I owned a little furniture business, office furniture, and we were running a sale one day in a hotel. Guy walks up to me at the sale, because I'd bring in a semi-load of furniture, and he looks at the desk I'm standing next to, and he says, $50? That's a piece of junk. And I go, yes, sir, it is, but that's a price. And the guy standing next to him says, because the guy yelling at me says, well, I'll give you 25. But there's another old oil man standing next to him who says, yeah, but I'd give you 30. And I look back at the first guy and I said, well, he said 30. Would you go to 35? Anybody going to get a 35? Would you get a 40? Get a $45. I was just playing when people started running from all over, throwing their hands up. I didn't know it was going to be an auction. Neither did they. But I kept it going, and we sold that desk for $75. I grabbed the chair right next to it. I said, all right, who to start me out at 25? And we sold every stick of furniture in that building in the next 91 minutes. And $17,000 of profit. I'm 23 years old. This is a pretty good 90 minutes of work. And so that's when I went out and started looking to buy an auction company, because I knew how much. You've ever read that book, The Millionaire Next Door? In that book, he talks about the most successful, financially successful businesses are auctioneers. Isn't that interesting?
That is really interesting.
Aha, you're writing that down.
I am. I'm constantly taking notes.
Because they're clever enough to watch and wait. And if they see a $13,000 tractor and it's selling for $3,000, they're going to sell it to themselves. and they're going to buy that tractor, and they're going to keep bringing it back to the next auction, the next auction, the next auction, until somebody gives them $13,000 for it. So a lot of times when you go into an auction, 10-15% of the stuff in the sale belongs to the auctioneer, because he's been hanging on to it for the last couple of weeks until someone wants it, until two people want it.
Or at least two.
It's hard to get it if one person wants it. It's hard to get good money. And selling a business is the same way. If two people want the business, it's a lot easier to sell. And so whenever we sold any of these 21 companies, we always made that a point, get the buyers halfway through the flip and start lining them up. Hey, I'm going to have this company 18 months from now. Do you want it? And then make sure all the other buyers that you're talking to know each other.
So can you tell us what the biggest deal you have ever done is?
Jamie, I'll tell you about the biggest day I've ever had. Now, I don't mean a day where I sold a business. Most of the businesses that I have sold have been 200, 400, 600,000, in that range, 500,000. Because I buy them for almost nothing. I have two envelopes, 5 and 10,000. I look for people that are, they have a good product, or there's something good about their business, but they're terrible business people. And being a terrible business person it always boils down to two things. They're not focusing on what they do that works, or they let their numbers get out of control. And they have no idea why they're not making money. Which I always find disgusting that you don't know this. But the biggest day, the most income I ever made in a single day, is I made $1,010,000 in profit in 3 hours. It was the best thing that ever happened. It was in 1999, and I was doing a presentation, a group presentation to potential customers, and I was selling a marketing plan to accounting firms. And I got on the stage at 9 o'clock in the morning. There were 145 potential buyers in the room. And I spent the next 3 hours explaining how they could build their accounting practice using QuickBooks seminars as a marketing tool. And at the end of the 3 hours, and I gave them everything I knew. I mean, I told them everything I knew for after doing this for a couple of years. And then I said, do you want to become a distributor? If you do, you need to give me $10,000 right now. And here's an order form. And I made them run up and get the order form. And of course, you always use limited availability. I know we've got 150 people, but I've only got 60 territories open. I can only take 60 of you. So the first 60 to come to the front of the room, you can have an order form. Well, I actually had 150 order forms in my hand in case everybody came up, but I acted like I only had 60. And when the first guy jumped up and took one, I said, 59 left, 58 left, 57 left. And pretty soon there was a rush to the stage to become a QuickBooks distributor and hand me a $10,000 check right at the moment. And between 11:55 when I started and 12:05, 110 people had taken an order form, filled it out, attached a check or credit card, and walked to the back of the room and gave it to my staff. And then they got on the airplane and went home. And my staff was looking at me after the dust settles, and they said, boss, you just made over $1 million in 3 hours. And I was actually pretty pleased. And I said, yeah, let's do it again next week. We tried, but I was never able to duplicate that again. Come hell or high water, I could not duplicate that moment when I had 150 needful people in the room. And of course, that was really the key question. Are they needful? Is it a hungry audience? These people had flown to San Diego because they really wanted to do this. I think that's a terrible mistake we make in business, is we go off on what we think is important rather than finding out what customers want. And that can sure turn into years and years of headache.
Yeah, I think that's very true, especially in the accounting world. We think people need tax returns, but that's not what they need.
Well, mostly they just don't want to go to jail.
Right.
If there were no prison sentences for not filing, there would be no accounting industry.
Oh, that's so true. I love that. That's so true. That's the biggest. You're right.
And I've had many people ask me, well, how come you don't mind paying income taxes? And well, I hate it. I hate it. But I just look at it as a franchise fee to be able to operate under contract law. And so I guess I have to pay it or I don't get contract law.
That's right. Otherwise they come at you. So you've actually developed a process for the sales through your foundation, the Self-Employed Foundation. That's what you're working on right now, right?
Well, I'm retired now.
Oh, okay.
And so I have one product called Autokept. Now, that's a software that I invented using a bunch of whiz kids out of the University of Arizona in Tucson. And what I told them was that the vast majority of people that get letters from the IRS, and the IRS sends out 100 million letters a year, and they're just shooting in the dark, hoping that somebody will send them $300 here, $500 there, and tax collections are through the roof in America because of these letters. Well, it certainly helps that the economy is doing very well now too, but they're sending out these letters and people are defenseless on the most part. So, especially in a correspondence audit. So in 2014, I got an audit notice myself, and it didn't go well. The audit took 2 years to complete. It got bigger and bigger and bigger because when the auditor asked me for the business purpose of a hotel invoice, I couldn't tell them exactly why I was in Dubuque, Iowa. And so she said, well, that's personal then. You took a personal trip. And
why would anybody go to Dubuque?
Dubuque? Are you kidding me? I went to Dubuque on a personal trip. 3 minutes, you look at the Mississippi, and after that, the trip is over. Personal. Anyway, one thing led to another, and then I really got nailed because I was doing a loss carry forward on one of my projects that didn't work, and I had a loss carry forward from 2004, and I made the mistake of not keeping all the filing cabinets because in 2016 she said, show me the paperwork for the loss carry forward, and I don't have it. I kept it 10 years. So that ended up costing me $350,000. That mistake. And I got an invoice for $350,000. And so now it would have never got to that point if I had been able to prove why I was in Dubuque on the hotel bill. Because she wouldn't have kept digging. She would have kept coming up with answer. And the audit would have been over and I might have owed $4,000 or $5,000. But since I said, no, I don't have this, she said, what else don't you have? And it was getting juicier and juicier as she dug and dug. And I went to my lawyers and my accountants, because we hired tax workout guys and lawyers to keep us. And here's what they told me, honestly. We think you better just pay and shut up. Because if she keeps digging, you may end up in prison. So I paid the $350, but that was enough of that. So I went down to the University of Arizona and said, I had this idea that if I could just talk to my phone and my bookkeeping would get done, that it sure would save me all the headaches of receipts and business purpose, contemporaneous recording, etc. So I went down to the University of Arizona because voice recognition was just coming online. Siri was brand new. And so I found a half a dozen little techno terrorists. Some of them weren't even old enough to shave yet. And I gave them all a job. I said, we're going to build this software. You can use the software as your resume. When you graduate from college, take the software code to Google or Facebook and get a good job, because I'm only going to pay you minimum wage. And so for the next 2 years, we worked on this program called Autokept. And so now today, when I spend money It's a real simple thing, whether someone's handing me a check or I'm spending $40 in cash, which my wife, who's an accountant, also hates when I spend cash, but I still do. I can't get out of the habit. And whenever I do anything financially, they always hand you a piece of paper. There's always a piece of paper that is generated. I simply pull out my phone, take a picture of the piece of paper, and then I touch the listen button and I start talking about why I spent the money. I just spent $40 to buy copy paper for the office. I just spent $39.45 on American Express ending in 9002 for taking Bob Johnson to lunch. We talked about the Tobacco Road project. And I'm just talking to the phone in a voice. It's recording it. But using artificial intelligence, it can pick the key words out of that voice track and code the transaction into a qualified accounting transaction with the business purpose, all the contemporaneous details, and a photograph of the paper associated with it, and put it all into a spreadsheet in the correct column, and the bookkeeping's done.
That is amazing to me. Actually recommended it to somebody. They're like, well, I have a small business. I was like, check out Autokept. Like, all you have to do is talk to it after you and I talked, because it's amazing how many small businesses we have who can't keep track of their stuff.
60 million.
I know.
There are 60 million people in America that have to track that, and they're vulnerable if they don't.
Yeah. And I mean, full disclosure, I'm vulnerable. I get a pile of receipts and then I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. And it ends up in the trash.
Yeah, well, you better hope you don't get the same auditor I got.
Well, I'm like really hopeful now.
Because that's expensive. But Jimmy, you know, I might be jumping ahead here, but people can actually get a free copy. We don't charge for Autokept because it's distributed through a nonprofit foundation called the Small Business Federation. And you can get a copy of by just going to autokept.com, and it's AUTO, like automobile, auto, kept, KEPT.
Yeah.
Autokept.com.
We'll link it in the description box.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, and then download it, and we'll actually, if you want us to, we'll call you on the phone and help you get it up and running.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's included for free. We'll do that so that you can actually get your transactions recorded. It's done through the nonprofit. And that's what I'm running now, that I've pretty much wound down all of my business adventures. And we're down to raising kids and raising chickens and maybe raising a little hell still.
Yeah, right. So so who is Autokept for? So what kind of business owners?
The smallest business owner would be the gig economy worker. So I'm driving an Uber car, and I've got expenses. I think that if I just run them all on the credit card, it's a good expense. The IRS is going to take it. Here's a heads up. That's not true. If you're not recording a business purpose along with the expense, then it's going to be disallowed. So that's the smallest person. Then we work up the food chain to the contractor that's got employees running around at the Home Depot buying 22 befores or 6 boxes of nails, and the guy's losing the receipt, and the bookkeeper's having a fit, or doesn't know what job to cost it to. And so this is all going into a spreadsheet. So when she sees that Home Depot charge come through, she can simply type in $82.86 into the spreadsheet. There's the transaction, picture of the receipt, and the contemporaneous recorded voice of the foreman standing in the aisle at the Home Depot. So now the bookkeeper doesn't have to call him up and listen to that song and dance that she knows she's going to get. She's heard it before. So anywhere from that small independent guy doing $10,000 a year up to maybe some business with 10 employees that are running around spending company money. Once you get past the 10 employee point, then you should probably look at switching over to Expensify or Get Divvy, one of those debit cards that directly link right into accounting software. But up until that point, you don't need that complication. You know, there are 60 million people that need to track money. And remember, those 21 businesses that I bought, not one of them tracked money. They were all sloppy bookkeepers, and they had sloppy accounting because they didn't think it was important. And so I made a fortune off them. I bought them for 10 or 15,000 bucks and sold them for 2 or 3 or 400,000 2 years later. And I did it 21 times because they didn't want to do the work of tracking the money that comes in and goes out.
It really just speaks to how important the bookkeeping is.
Oh, nobody appreciates it.
No, they don't. We get a lot of pushback on, pricing on bookkeeping, but it's like, do you ever want to sell this thing? We have to do this.
And I'll give you something else really interesting that we discovered working closely with accounting. I've discovered over my lifetime, 50 years in business, starting at 16 years old, now 66, that most small businesses should really focus the number of customers they have down to maybe about 100.
Why is that so important?
Because we can no longer be in mass merchandising. Everything that can be mass merchandised has already been done by Home Depot or the Shell gas station chains. Anything that can be sold without interaction is pretty much standardized and sold by mass. Much of the rest is being sold by Amazon. Today, if you're a small business owner, it's a one-to-one service that you're providing for the most part. And that'd be the engineer, the accountant, the lawyer, the contractor who's doing custom kitchen rebuilds, that sort of thing. So there's a one-to-one contact with the customer. Now, here's the reason you want to stick to 100 customers, because it's so much easier to build a strong ongoing relationship with a small number of people where you have a real tight personal interaction with them. They're dependent on you and you're dependent on them. And all you need to do is find 100 people who will allow you to net $833 a month. So in the accounting industry, like you are, for example, you might need to charge this person $2,000 a month. So I'm billing them $2,000. I'm doing enough work that they're getting $2,000 worth of value, but you're netting $833. If you have 100 people netting you $833, that's $1 million a year net income.
That's crazy.
And you're doing well, and you're not driving yourself crazy, always looking for the next client.
So what is because you've been in the accounting industry. I know everybody who's in the accounting industry right now or pays their accountant is probably going $2,000 a month per client. That's a lot. How do you help people find the value in that $2,000? And how do you help them get out of the transactional relationship? So I can't tell you how many tax people I know who prepare to, thousands of $250 returns every year. How do you help them not do that?
Well, I think the fastest way to get out of that is to, if you were starting new today, you take the first 100 people that you can get, and you do anything you can for them, because you just want to have cash flow, you want to have some influence, but in the marketplace, you want to get things going. Now, when client 101 comes in, though, look at how much profit each of your clients are making you now. And this is something that we always stress to all of our clients. Always do a P&L, not by month, not by location. Do your profit and loss by customer. And which customers make us money. And it's not always your biggest customer. Oftentimes, the customer that's spending the most with you is the biggest pain in the neck possible. And they've already worked you down on the margin so much that you're just taking the business to keep the doors open. That's what happened to the home health care company. Half the business they had was unprofitable and they didn't even know it. So if I'm an accountant today, what I'm going to look for is, I just want to make sure that phone's off. I see someone's about to call me. Sorry.
You're fine.
If I'm in the accounting business today, the thing I want to look for is where is this client when a client 101 comes in, is this new client going to be in the top half of my income makers or the bottom half? And if they're going to come in at the bottom half, I'm not going to take them at all. If they come in and they're at the top half, I'm going to add them to the group, but I'm going to go to number 100 and kick him out. And now I may kick him out to one of my employees and let them do it. I may sell them off to the guy down the street that's just trying to get started.
Mm-hmm.
I won't ask for him very much. You know, hey, give me $500 and I'll give you this bad client. He'll make you $1,000 a year, but that doesn't fit me, so you can have him. Mm-hmm. And so I get a little bit out of him rather than just run him off. But I start working on just taking the good ones. Now, what do we do to make $833? Honey, they're spending that kind of money now. They're spending thousands right now on an internal bookkeeper, internal CFO, internal accounting softwares and systems and billing processes, and all of it in chaos because they're doing it one up where you're doing it for 100 businesses, and you can do the same thing for all 100 and do it successfully. They're trying to do it one at a time and figure it out one at a time. Well, that's plumb nuts. This business owner doesn't make any money worrying or thinking or planning or learning how to do accounting.
Say that again for us.
This business owner does not make any money doing or planning or managing or learning accounting and everything that's associated with it. They make
Amen.
And so what we need to tell these clients is, what are you doing that makes money?
Mm-hmm.
This is a real critical sentence. What do you do that makes money? And let them talk. Mm-hmm. And go on. Pretend you were in your therapy session when you used to take therapy, and you heard that all the time. Go on. And,
yep. And
let them continue talking. Make notes, and then ask them one simple question. Why are you doing anything else?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be rich? Do you want to work less? Do you want to have more fun? And if I ever got a client who said, well, I don't want to be rich, our meeting was over.
Yeah, I want to work 80 hours a week and not sleep.
And so when you find that person, you really seriously need to get up and walk out of the room, because they're going to transfer their chaos to you.
Oh, so true.
And you don't get to sleep.
So true.
So I don't want their chaos. I mean, one time, this is funny, we had a bookkeeping client, and we told them we're going to take care of everything. Mm-hmm. And the bookkeeping client, for some reason, thought, now I can just throw all my receipts and paperwork into a trash bag, and then I'll give you the trash bag. Well, one morning, without my knowledge, he drove by. We had a house on the beach at that time. He rode his bicycle by and threw the trash bag over the fence into the yard. And at 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, I get up at 7 to take the kids to school, and there's a trash bag in my yard full of paper. The dump truck was coming that day, so I just took it out to the street and threw it in the trash.
Of course you did. That's what any of us would have done.
It was 6 months of accounting. Oh. Boy, was he surprised when he heard about that.
I am so stressed by the trash bag full of receipts.
Yeah, so we had to finally go, well, the trash bag full of receipts goes away with Autokept. That disappears. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the other ways that accountants can actually make a lot more success, is take everything the business owner's bad at mm-hmm. and standardize it. And the one thing you cannot accept is, well, we don't do it that way. We do it this way. Mm-hmm. And don't accept that.
No. You work with us. You do what we ask you to do.
Yeah, we're going to give you the system. And and when the big 6 accounting, or big 4, big 2, or whatever they are this week,
I don't know anymore.
They do a lot of outsourcing. That is a big chunk of their income. Of course, they only do it for companies who have 500 employees or more. But when they come in, they completely standardize the entire process to fit what they know how to deliver, and that's all they'll do. If you want to change something, you'll have to hire somebody else because your ideas are not good. That's a tough thing to say to somebody. But so here's what I'm always looking for. When I was in the accounting business, my wife still does a little bit of it. Are you going to be in the top half or the bottom half? Can we start working together to look for ways to make more profit? Will you accept my advice and follow it?
Mm-hmm.
And will you get to the point where I'm going to net $833 a week?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a month.
Mm-hmm.
I want to net $833 a month off your account. Then you're in my top 100. And the 100 is a small enough group. I can call them up and go to lunch. I love taking 3 or 4 of my clients to lunch at once.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, that was my biggest sales tool. I'd bring 3 or 4 clients to lunch and then bring 1 or 2 prospects. And I wouldn't say a word about you should do business with me. I would simply let those 1 or 2 people talk to the 4 people I'm doing business with now, and it took all the sales pressure off of me. But there was one real critical factor that made the difference between building a successful business quickly, 100 clients, and $1 million a year net income. And here it is. Is this human being the kind of person that I would invite to my home on Sunday afternoon to have dinner with my kids at the table? And if they weren't that person, we fired them.
How do you deal with clients that you really like, but will never pay you that amount? Will never net that amount?
We sold them off.
Yeah.
I was heartless.
That's all right.
And you know, we can still be friends, but I can't be your accountant because you're not doing what I tell you.
That's a problem, right?
But we were real frank when we took them. And now here's something interesting. 1/3 of the people that I sold accounting to fired us within 4 months. 1/3. And that's because when we told them how they're going to run the money, that they just didn't want to fix it. They didn't want to change. Nope. That's not the way we do it here. And you know everything they did. Rob Peter, pay Paul, commingle funds, do accounts receivable financing, all those things that they can do to kill themselves. We'd see it. They wouldn't fix it. We're not going to be at your funeral.
Put every car they own and their family on the books. I saw that recently. I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, or the biggest mystery one that we'd always find is, how come you have an apartment downtown? What's that apartment in the downtown district for?
Yeah, we don't even want to get into that. So, you know, because you've been in this industry for so long, what is the biggest obstacles you see in the accounting and tax industry right now and coming up?
Well, I think the biggest obstacle is the same that was there 50 years ago. The clients don't appreciate the value of your work.
Amen. So true.
And
it's so hard.
It has nothing to do with technology, the economy, multinationals buying up your best clients. It's always the same. The client doesn't appreciate accounting. And that is the only way to get around that is to keep the number of customers you have limited and become such an intricate part of their business that they could never see themselves getting rid of you. And that's why we're so big on this. Stop at 100 clients. If you need 10,000 clients, then sell something on the internet and good luck to you. Which, by the way, I absolutely think is an awful business plan, because as soon as you figure out something to do on the internet that's really good, your competitors are going to steal it and they're going to do it too.
Right.
And then your 10,000 units a month all of a sudden drop to 4,000. You don't know why. Well, it's because somebody saw what you're doing, and there you have no secrets on the internet.
Right.
So don't depend on that.
So the craziest thing to me is people that sell products, but I've seen them grow by creating community around the products. Like that's how they continue to grow. And that's how they continue to sell, because they're creating relationship.
If you started at 21 in the accounting business with this concept of 100 clients, you would probably have 20 or 30 of those same 100 60 years later, when you're 65, 40 years later, I'm ready to retire. But here's what you would have had. 24-hour work weeks, 40 weeks a year over the last 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
You would never have a cash flow problem because you know exactly who's going to pay you when. And so you would have made $1 million, lived on 250 and banked the rest. And you get out to 65 years old and you're rich. You've never worked more than 40 hours a week or 24 hours, 40 weeks a year or 24 hours in a week. And you have best friends. And you'll probably outlive all your best friends because you've had a calm life.
Mm-hmm.
But you are honored in your community because you've been so helpful to so many people. You have sent kids to college because your advice got the college funding done.
Mm-hmm.
You have kept people married because remember the number one reason they divorce is because of money. So kids have gone to college, marriages have survived, homes have been paid for, retirements have been funded. For 100 people, you have made their life better because you have been the advisor, the guardian angel over dollars and cents.
Oh, makes so much sense. It makes so much sense.
Makes you proud to be an accountant, doesn't it?
I love being an accountant. I do. I love the numbers. I love helping people. I love watching them grow their businesses and help them do that.
Awesome.
I love to help people, raise prices and make more money with less people. And, it's so fun to watch people's dreams not kill them. Right?
And you can be a big part of that.
Yeah. And that's what's so fun about being an accountant.
So, Jamie, I think our time is up.
Yes. I have one more question for you.
I'd like to answer it.
Okay. So, but before I do that, what is the easiest way for people to find you?
To simply go to autokept.com.
Okay.
AUTOKEPT.com. Download the app. Download the app.
Yeah. Because
the app has direct communication back to us, and you can ask me any question. You'll find our phone number there. If you would like to call, you're welcome to. We'll call you if you want us to. There's a question. Do you want us to give you support?
Mm-hmm.
And if you click yes, then we'll help you set it up, train you how to do transactions, that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
Because the nonprofit wants you to be ready when you get that letter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think you're not going to get that letter, yeah, right. You are going to get that letter.
And also, this saves you time. It saves you time going back and forth with your bookkeeper on what needed to happen and where's the receipt and what is this for. And you can spend more time making money, right?
Well, yeah, I was hoping that we wouldn't even have to say that.
Well, I think we do. I think that people need to understand the value of, proper record keeping as you get more time to do your business.
That you only do one or two things in your business that make money.
Mm-hmm.
If you're worrying about a receipt, you are not doing that one or two thing.
So true.
And you're stressing yourself out and you're overworking the hours. Just do the one or two thing and get rid of everything else out of your life.
I love it. All right. So my last question for you is, if you could give one piece of advice to small business owners or entrepreneurs, what would it be?
The best piece of advice: go home and have dinner with your family.
That's a good one. Good one.
If you can't go home and have dinner with your family, figure out why. Because you're making mistakes, and you're making a lot of mistakes in a lot of places. Go home and have dinner with your family.
That's so good. Casey, thank you so much for your time today.
Jamie, I've had a lot of fun.
Okay,
and
good.
You pulled some amazing, I didn't know I was so smart until after I talked to you.
Most people don't know that. So,
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you prefer to listen. If you learned something and found some useful information to apply to your business today, please consider giving us a thumbs up and a review. Until next week, be abundant.